to me, that's what the label that I put on it, because I know they're different, is common sense. Does that have any correlation with being
Highly sensitive? Not necessarily. So I think someone, and I'll raise my hand here, can be highly sensitive and have no common sense whatsoever in certain areas. Being highly sensitive and deeply processing doesn't mean you then have the sense to go ahead and implement it or to act upon what you've processed. And you have to remember that everything that a human being does is being processed through your own filters. So and those filters have a great impact on what the end result. So if you are looking for, I think common sense is something different than being highly sensitive. Highly sensitive is a distinct neurologic genetic trait. Common sense is a learned behavior. So I think you can find them living together in the same person or not. Does that help?
a little?
Okay.
I just find it a different form of intelligence, though, and sensitivity and insightfulness, I guess that's what I'm trying to do. Because I'm not convinced that it's a learned thing. I truly, either you're born with it or you're not. You can't, I mean, that's just my opinion, but in dealing with certain things, I think you'll definitely handle it.
I think probably, in the strict definition, probably not. And then you, okay?
One has auditory processing disorder.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that's probably because he is so highly sensitive. You can only focus on one conversation at a time. Or if I have the music playing in the car while I'm starting to drive, he can't process the music and drive at the same time.
Well, sensory processing disorders, any of them are actually distinct from being highly sensitive. So, high sensitivity, the scientific name of it is sensitivity processing. Actually, I have this written down somewhere because I knew I was going to forget it. Give me a second. Sensory processing sensitivity. So, but it is not something that is so extreme that it interferes with daily life. Therefore, it is not a syndrome or a disorder. Whereas sensory processing disorders like hearing are actually a disorder. Okay. So there's the difference. Okay.
This is kind of an off the beaten path question, but since you're defining this in terms of a neurological difference, there would be some biological markers within one's brain as to the existence. That being said, would a post-mortem autopsy of someone's brain who's highly sensitive be able to be picked up? Are they that distinct?
No. It has to do with neurotransmitters. So I don't think it'll show up in the postmortem. And if you're interested in that level of research, if you go to Elaine's website, she's done most of the research. You can read about her, the research that's being done and look at the actual studies.
Okay, so when you say it's more neurological,
It's a genetic trait.
right, but it's more neurological transmitters, i.e. the things are going through neurons. Is it the neurons per se, or the chemicals that are triggered, and the electrical currents?
Neurotransmitters.
I'm sorry?
The chemicals.
So it's not so much
And you know what, I'm going to pause you there
Okay.
because this is going places I
Okay, that's fine.
tonight.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I will refer you to Elaine's website. If you
Okay.
want to know more about it, she's got.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
She stopped it.
Sure. Okay. So I would like at this point, we have time, to do a quick exercise with everyone. And so what I'm going to encourage you all to do now that you have your notebooks and everything out is put them down. Get things out of your hands if you can. There's going to be places where your body just ain't comfortable, and sometimes it's in chairs like this. So acknowledging that. So be as comfortable as you can in your chair. And then what I'd like you to do is we're going to bring our attention specifically to our breath. And I'd like you, and I'll count this off, we're going to inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. We're going to repeat that a few times. And I want you to really, really focus on just feeling and observing the breath. So we're going to inhale and exhale. And inhale Focusing on your breath, noticing your breath. What is it that you're noticing about your breath? Maybe take 2 or 3 more breaths, observing. When you're done, just let your breath return to its normal rhythm. Okay. So if you can, capture what you noticed. And the reason I suggested this, focusing on our breath takes our attention away from the stuff going on around us and gives us an opportunity to really allow our senses to track just one sensory input as much as possible. And if you're tracking one sensory input, you have the opportunity to notice what sense or senses seem to take, what seems to be the primary sense that you're noticing with. Losing circulation in the hand. So, how many people noticed their breath primarily through sound? Okay. How many noticed it primarily through taste? Interesting, usually there are a few tasters. Anyone notice scent primarily?
It seemed to get deeper and easier.
Okay. So you were feeling the body sensation, the tactile. Okay. So body, you notice it through the body. Okay. All right. Awesome. So one of the things you can
What about temperature?
temperature would be tactile, so body sensation.
Cooler going in and warm.
So what that sense that came to the forefront there happens to be your sense of touch. Okay, that sense of noticing. So you can do this exercise with almost anything. I suggest you go outside, sit under a tree, and notice. And you can also roll through all of your senses and notice which one seems to be bringing in the most information. And if you have one that is good like that. And the reason that it can be helpful to notice that is because the sense that is bringing in the most information is the one that's going to be most easily overwhelmed. And it's the one where self-care is going to help a lot. So I'll use me as an example.
For an HSP person or for everybody?
This is primarily for highly sensitive people, but it can work, I think, for someone who's not.
So if it's sound.
If sound bugs you, yes,
Got
then it's good to take care of yourself in terms of sound and not
Got
being in loud environments too frequently. So one of the things that I know about myself is, I'm an aromatherapist, and so my sense of smell is both my greatest joy and my biggest kryptonite. You turn me loose with bottles of essential oils or an herb garden, and I'm just loopy. The lavender, I should probably get a room. It's that bad. But scents that distress me profoundly, and will literally stop me from being able to be in a space or to focus on doing things. And I actually had to leave a job once because I could not take the stench of mildew in the office. Mind you, I was the only person who could smell it. So, exactly. And that right there is a prime example of being highly sensitive. So you might be the person who can hear the fluorescent lights or the ceiling fans whine. Exactly. Or might be the person for whom the visual cacophony of whatever art it is that they have, or just, the sea of cubicles creates is intolerable. It might be that the chair you're sitting in, the fabric is so scratchy, you just simply want to rip your skin off, or take a hammer to a chair. So, there's those responses can be really profound. And if you know what your kryptonite is, then you know how to deal with it. You know what to look for. And if you're going into an environment, you know what to be aware of. Okay? And that feeds into, if you're going to be a leader, and your kryptonite is loud crowds, then you need to be a kind of leader who is not necessarily going on and leading loud crowds. You don't want to be an advocate doing marches. You might want to organize and then let other folks who are good at organize march. Okay? All right.
So once you figure that out, if you realize like being a loud crowd, large party, and that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen after 3 weeks. And like, and you're in that environment. Like, how would, are there other coping mechanisms for HSP people other than avoidance?
There are, yes. And which coping mechanisms work the best is dependent on the person themselves. So for some people, again, I'll use myself as an example.
Immersion therapy.
Well, no, absolutely never, ever immersion therapy.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's how to drive an HSP right off the ledge. So one of the things that I do, because sense of smell, but the other thing for me is visual input. Like standing in this room tonight and having all of your faces out there, plus spinning ceiling fans, plus little sparkling lights, plus plants, plus stones, and my visual sense is back here screaming, "Oi!" So one of the things that I do is I practice yogic breathing, three-part breath, which helps bring me to center, which I can do anytime. I can do it standing in front of you if I get yelled at, if I'm being quiet for a minute because you guys are doing something else, I can do a couple of three-part breaths. That helps keep me centered and keeps me out of overwhelm. I also use essential oils because scent, I'm working with the scent. That is my, the thing that brings me joy. So tonight I happen to be wearing Melissa, which is extremely anti-anxiety, and Tulsi, which takes me into the sacred. So, and I can smell them as I'm standing up here. So, and that for me is a thread that I follow. Here's the scent, I breathe, I let it release, and I'm here in my body again. And all of the visual cacophony is something that then can just be background for a little while. So it depends on who you are, what techniques you develop. But a lot of them have to do with discovering how you ground, how you center, what makes you feel calm, and what can bring you into a sense of peace. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong are very, very good tools. Mindfulness meditation, another good tool. Walks in nature, depending on, again, your senses. For me, those are extraordinarily healing. For other people, they can be overwhelmed because of the sense of space or noise or whatever is going on. Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So I've talked a little bit about this, or touched on it just a tiny bit, but I want to, ease into, the gift of being an HSP. And I wrote this earlier. It's cooperating, so bear with me. I wrote this earlier, and I think rather than riff, I'm just going to read it. This is and again, this is another way for an HSP to take a step back and be less projective and gather just a few minutes of strength. So I'm modeling self-care behaviors. So the gift of being an HSP, so like everyone in this room, I'm a multifaceted person. You heard in Amy's introduction, I'm a mom, I'm a coach, I'm a nature intuitive. I have this steady stream of conversation that hits the back of my mind from all things nature, trees, plants, stones, you name it. And I am, as is everyone in this room, a living system. So I'm an ecosystem, I'm a human ecosystem. You're an ecosystem, you're an ecosystem. Everybody in this room is a human ecosystem. And we human beings, like ecosystems, are embedded in communities, our work environments, our faith communities, our backyards and parks and watersheds. We are all interdependent. We are ecosystems within ecosystems, weaving the great ecosystem that is this planet. Every member of this ecosystem, each person, animal, road, trees, and microbe, has an essential contribution to make in support of the thriving of the whole. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, but as highly sensitive people, one of our contributions is to be an early warning system. And to be that part of the ecosystem that does the observe, think, and act. There's one of my children used to watch a TV program called News Clues. I don't know if anybody out there had children who watched that. But one of the things that Steve taught the children was stop, breathe, and think. And if there was ever a motto for highly sensitive people, stop, breathe, and think, is it? Because stop, breathe, recenter yourself, think, because that's your native state, and then move into action. Oh, okay. So, our being HSPs is actually a survival strategy, being observant before acting. And that is why, as leaders, as advocates, as activists, we can be especially helpful. And we're needed. But one of the things that happens is because so many of us are introverts and because we've received pushback from the world about who we are and how we perceive things, and because it is so difficult for some of us to do things like public speaking, because it feels so frightening, we avoid leadership roles. Sit in a room of highly sensitive people, and I've done this recently. I've been doing circles for highly sensitive folks down at the Resiliency Center. And on the first night that we had the circle, we mentioned the idea of leadership, and everyone in the room was like, no, thank you. This is not for me. I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to be standing out in front of anything. And the thing is, we are so uniquely qualified to be effective leaders, to be compassionate leaders, to be the kinds of leaders that we need now. So, I'm thinking, yeah, we'll go here. So why are we good leaders? We're thoughtful, intuitive, empathetic, creative, visionary, and conscientious, to a fault conscientious. Often inspired to devote ourselves to work and causes we find meaningful. We are excellent listeners, really excellent listeners. We're invested in helping people reach their potential, and although it may look on the surface like we're averse to taking risks, we're not. We take very measured risks. And one of the reasons that's important is, I was reading, because I'm doing career coaching, I read a lot about business and success in business. And one of the things I was reading recently was talking about, the perception that entrepreneurs are risk takers. They're out there just taking risks, one after the other. And when they did research and a survey into successful entrepreneurs, what they discovered wasn't that they were just taking risks one after the other. It was that they were a tiny bit risk averse. And what they were doing was they were taking risks that were very measured and were very calculated. And those were the ones who were succeeding, not the ones who were out there looking like they were going gangbusters and taking all the risks. So as leaders, we take measured risks. We're willing, because we're passionate about what we believe in, if there's a risk to be taken and we have done our processing and we have met with our community and we're convinced that it's a good thing, we will step up and we will say, damn the torpedoes, and we will take the risk. But we don't do it without knowing that it is a risk worth taking. And that's an important quality in a leader. Okay. So I think I need to pause, actually. I know we're a little bit before 8:45, but are you okay if we pause here?
Sure.
Because my energy just went. through the floor. I need a little tree time. So, I'm gonna put this down here. And Amy, do you want to come up and announce anything? Or?